He didn't share his journey to create fear. He shared it so others wouldn't walk blindly into the same danger. The truth carried a weight far deeper than anyone expected. Because behind that composed exterior, James had been living with a shadow most people never saw coming. For most people, a health scare is something they keep private. But when James Pickens Jr. stepped forward with a message that stunned fans across the world, it wasn't just another celebrity announcement. It was a wake-up call. The man millions know as the calm, steady heartbeat of Grey's Anatomy revealed a personal battle he'd been quietly preparing for his entire life. And what he shared didn't just shock viewers, it forced many to rethink what they thought they knew about him. Because behind that composed exterior, James had been living with a shadow most people never saw coming. And when he finally broke the silence, the truth carried a weight far deeper than anyone expected. But the story didn't start with his announcement. It began years before, long before the cameras, the fame, or the fan love. And what pushed him to finally speak out might be the most unexpected part of all. When James finally chose to speak, he did it in the simplest way possible. An Instagram post with just a few heartfelt words, no dramatic buildup, no long explanation, just a quiet confession that hit harder than anything he'd said on screen. He revealed that he'd faced something life-altering, and that he had come out the other side grateful, humbled, and very much changed. Fans flooded the comments within minutes, stunned and emotional. But what truly caught everyone's attention wasn't just the news itself, it was the love pouring in from his castmates. People who've worked beside him for years immediately stepped in, calling him family, sending him strength, and reminding the world just how deeply respected he really is. And yet, even in the middle of that overwhelming wave of support, there was something unspoken in his message, something that made people wonder what he'd been carrying in silence long before he hit post. Because this wasn't a sudden crisis. This was the moment he finally opened a door he had kept shut for decades, one that led straight into the part of his life fans never saw. Long before James ever shared his story with the world, he lived with a quiet understanding that one day, this moment might come. It wasn't fear, it was awareness. Because in his family, this illness wasn't rare. It was something that moved from generation to generation, like a shadow following the men in his bloodline. His father faced it, several of his uncles battled it. Even distant relatives, men who lived long, full lives, still had their own encounters with the same diagnosis. When he talked about it, he didn't sound shocked. If anything, he spoke with a calm acceptance, as if he'd always known that his turn might arrive. And that's what makes this part of his story so streaking. While most people discover these health issues unexpectedly, James spent decades preparing, not out of dread, but out of responsibility. He kept track of the pattern. He paid attention to family stories. He stayed aware of the quiet warnings history was already leaving behind. So when his test results finally showed something he didn't want to see, it wasn't a moment of disbelief. It was the moment everything his family had lived through suddenly became real for him too. But this is where the story takes a turn. Because despite that long family history, what happened next wasn't something anyone could have predicted. And the discovery that changed everything didn't come with symptoms or clear signs. It appeared in a way that caught even his doctors off guard. For more than 30 years, James kept a promise to himself. Yearly checkups, no excuses. While many people avoid screenings out of fear or discomfort, he showed up every single year, knowing his family history wasn't something he could afford to ignore. And for a long time, everything looked normal. Every test came back steady, every result reassuring. Then, one routine appointment changed the rhythm of that certainty. His PSA levels suddenly climbed higher than they should have done, not dramatically, not in a way that screamed danger, but just enough to raise a question his doctor couldn't brush aside. That small shift was the first clue that something deeper was happening. A specialist got involved, scans were ordered, and during the MRI, doctors spotted something that didn't belong. It wasn't large, and it wasn't obvious, almost like a faint mark hidden in the background, but it was suspicious enough to demand answers. The biopsy confirmed what no one wanted to hear: a tumor, caught in the earliest stage, sitting quietly without symptoms or warning signs. It was the kind of discovery that easily could have been missed, But in James's case, decades of caution paid off.
But what came next was even more surprising. The doctors found a rare variant, something they almost never saw. And because of that, they weren't willing to leave anything up to chance. What they recommended would change the entire trajectory of his life. When the diagnosis came in, James didn't hesitate. He chose the most decisive path available, even though it meant taking a step most people pray they'll never face. Doctors suggested immediate surgery, and he agreed without wavering. After years of watching this illness move through his family, he wasn't going to wait for it to take control. The operation was a radical one, removing the source of the problem before it had the chance to spread. It was a difficult decision, but it offered the highest chance of a clean slate. And because the tumor had been found so early, the odds were firmly in his favor. Even with the rare variant, even with the uncertainty surrounding it, the timing worked in his favor. He caught it before it had the chance to turn into something far more dangerous. When he woke up after the procedure, he knew he'd made the choice that could very well save his life. And that moment, coming out of surgery, realizing what had just been prevented, sparked something in him. Because staying silent suddenly felt impossible. He had gotten his second chance. Now he wanted other people to have theirs. James could have kept everything private. He didn't owe the world an explanation, and he certainly didn't have to revisit the fear or uncertainty that came with his diagnosis. But something about the experience pushed him in a different direction. For years, he had watched men, especially men in his own community, avoid conversations about their health, avoid screenings, avoid the simple checkups that could save their lives. And he understood exactly why. The distrust, the stigma, the uncomfortable history, these were things he had grown up hearing about. But now he had lived through the consequences of staying informed. He had proof that early action worked. And he knew that if he stayed silent, someone else might ignore their own warning signs. So he decided to break the silence. Sharing his journey wasn't about sympathy or attention. It was about opening a door other men were too afraid to touch. By speaking up, he hoped to strip away the fear, the embarrassment, and the hesitation that kept so many from getting checked. And as soon as he went public, the impact was immediate. Not long after his announcement, James recorded a message that quickly spread across social media. He didn't sugarcoat the statistics. He reminded viewers that 1 in 8 men would face the same diagnosis at some point in their lives. And for Black men, the risk climbed even higher. It was the kind of information most people ignore until a familiar face says it directly to them. He spoke calmly, but the urgency behind his words was unmistakable. He explained that early detection made all the difference, and that sometimes the body gives no clear signs at all. His own diagnosis proved it. No pain, no symptoms, nothing obvious, just a routine test that caught something small before it grew into something life-changing. And then came the part that hit hardest. He urged men, especially those with family history or increased risk, to start screening as early as age 40. Hearing those words from someone fans had watched on TV for nearly 2 decades made the message feel personal. It wasn't a statistic anymore. It was a warning wrapped in a story people cared about. In the end, James Pickens Jr.'s story isn't just about illness. It's about awareness, timing, and the courage to speak up when staying silent feels easier. His experience shows how one routine test can change everything, how family history can be both a warning and a guide, and how early action can rewrite a future that once seemed inevitable. He didn't share his journey to create fear. He shared it so others wouldn't walk blindly into the same danger. And now, with his voice reaching millions, his message has turned into something far bigger than a personal confession. It's become a reminder that health conversations don't have to happen after it's too late. Because if someone as steady and composed as James could face this battle quietly for so long, it begs a simple but powerful question. How many others are carrying their own risks without even knowing it? And that's why his story stays with you. It's not just what he went through, it's what he wants you to avoid.